Today's lecture is about natural pharma. So what is natural pharma? Natural pharma essentially is using drug discovery to search for natural products. A natural product is a compound that's a source of has numerous therapeutic agents. For many thousands of years, plants have been used as a source for medicine for mankind. And in fact, many today's drugs come from the earliest medical plant folklore. For example, we'll look at quinine from Peruvian bark and morphine from opium poppy, and something called atropine, which is from deadly nightshade, and there are also many others. Nature has a rich source of medicines. Despite the rise of combinatorial chemistry as an integral part of the lead discovery process, there are many natural products that still play a major role in as a starting material for drug discovery. So we can learn a lot from nature. In a report from about 2007, it was shown that 974 small molecules had new chemical entities which had been developed between 1981 and 2006. Out of these, 63% were natural derived or semi-synthetic derivatives of natural products. For certain therapies, such as antimicrobials or anti-neoplastics or antihypertensive or anti-inflammatory drugs, the numbers are much higher. In many cases, these products have been traditionally used for many years, and we can look to Chinese medicine for a start. Natural products may be useful as a source of novel chemical structures for modern techniques of development of antibacterial therapies. If we look at the history of medicine, until the Renaissance phase between the 14th and 17th century, a vast majority of drugs in the Western medicine were plant-derived extracts. During this period, there was a main change in Renaissance medicine, which was largely due to an increase in anatomical knowledge, which was aided by easing of the legal and cultural restrictions for dissecting cadavers. So how were diseases diagnosed? There was many methods of diagnosis during the early Renaissance period, which were not very different from what occurred during the Middle Ages. Physicians had no idea of how to cure infectious diseases, and so often when they were faced with a plague or syphilis, they did not really know what to do. So ineffective, desperate attempts to treat the diseases also included superstitious rites and magic. Even King Charles II was asked to help out by touching sick people in an attempt to cure them from something called scrofula, which is the king's evil. Scrofula was most likely a type of tuberculosis, which we commonly known as Mycobacteria tuberculosis. This is transmitted through it's a bacteria which is transmitted in the air when a person breathes out or coughs. In fact, at around about 1680, Charles II was touching patients for the king's evil, which was known as this tuberculosis, and actually over 92,000 people were touched by him, over 4,500 annually. There are a number of herbal remedies that have been discovered through the ages, and the most famous one is quinine. Quinine is found in the bark of the quinine tree, and it's been used as a treatment for malaria and also something called babesiosis, which is a malaria-type disease, and also its symptoms. Quinine is characterized to be toxic to the malarial pathogen, which is Plasmodium, which it interferes with the parasite's ability to dissolve and metabolize hemoglobin. The mechanism of action of quinine has not really been fully resolved or understood, and most widely accepted hypothesis of its action is based on the well-studied and closely related quinoline drug called chloroquine. This model involves the inhibition of hemocyasin biocrystallization in the heme detoxification pathway, which facilitates aggregation of cytotoxic heme. Free cytotoxic heme accumulates in the parasites, causing their deaths. Quinine may actually target the malaria's purine nucleoside phospholipase enzyme. Laudanum is actually based on opium. It's been used as a painkiller and also as a cough suppressant. It was first discovered by an English physician called Thomas Sydenham between 1624 and 1689. Opioid analgesics bind to something called the stereospecific receptors at many sites within the CNS, which also processes which affect both the perception of pain and the emotional response to pain. Although the precise site and mechanism of action has still not been fully determined, alteration in the release of various neurotransmitters within afferent nerves, which are sensitive to the painful stimuli, may be partially responsible for the analgesic effects. And when these medications are used as adjuncts to anesthesia, analgesic actions may provide dose-related protection against hemodynamic responses to surgical stress. Other types of ancient medicine are things called bloodletting, cupping, and tooth removal. In fact, a barber surgeon was one of the most common European medical practitioners in the Middle Ages, and they were actually in charge of caring for soldiers during and after battle. So in this era, these barber surgeons actually surgery was actually seldom conducted by physicians, and so the barbers would actually take this role because they possessed razors, and they had this was indispensable, obviously, for their trade, for like cutting hair and stuff. So they were able to do things like amputate limbs. During this period, surgical mortality was actually very high due to a lot of blood loss and infection, and the doctors thought that bloodletting treated illness, and barbers also applied something called leeches. Cupping therapy, this is actually an ancient form of alternative medicine, which a therapist actually puts these special cups onto the skin for a few minutes to create suction, and people get it for many purposes, including for helping with pain, inflammation, blood flow, relaxation, and well-being, and also as a type of deep tissue massage. You can see in the picture, this guy is having his tooth extracted. Tooth extraction has been around for many centuries. In the Middle Ages, before the discovery of antibiotics, tooth extraction was used to actually treat many varieties of illnesses. So not just because you had bad teeth. These extractions were often performed by also the local barber as well, and often without any anaesthetic, so it must have really hurt. There are a number of herbal remedies actually resembling the human body, and this concept comes from the doctrine of signatures, as it's reflecting in common names of some plants whose shapes and colours reminded herbalists of parts of the body where they thought to do good, for instance, so there wasn't really any science behind this. For example, eyebright was used for eye infections, head woundwort was thought to have antiseptic qualities. Liverwort was used to treat liver. Lungwort was used for pulmonary infections. Spleenwort was used to treat the spleen, and toothwort was used for treatment of tooth ailments. Mercury has been used for treatment of syphilis. Its formulated mercury was used as an ointment because it was recognised to have toxicity, and there was also a risk of poisoning when administered mercury as an elixir. Mercury was already actually being used in the Western Europe to treat many skin diseases. In fact, mercury is used as an ingredient in dental amalgams even today, and is an organic compound used as a preservative in vaccines, though this use is actually in decline. Alcohol has been used as for digestion. And in fact, the aperitif, which is this alcoholic beverage that you often have before a meal, it helps to kind of stimulate the appetite. This was actually first introduced in France, hence the name aperitif, in 1846, actually by a French chemist, a guy called Joseph Dubanel. And he actually created a wine-based drink as a way to deliver malaria-fighting quinine. Because the medicine was quite a bitter brew, he actually developed a formula of herbs and spices to mask the quinine's sharp flavour, and it worked so well that the recipe remained well guarded. In fact, it was used by French Foreign Legion soldiers, which made it of use in the mosquito-infested North Africa. So urine actually has been a common practice. So drinking or the local application of human or animal urine has been used for medicinal purposes and practice like all over the world. Its documented prescriptions in Europe originate from actually ancient Egypt, Greece, and Rome. While there's been many advances in antique medicine, they were forgotten after the fall of the Roman Empire, and the use of urine and other excrements were enjoyed continually quite popular in the medieval times. In fact, in ancient Indian yogic texts and ancient Chinese documents describe the benefits of drinking one's own urine. And actually, in certain religions, people still drink their own urine, which sounds pretty horrible. It can be assumed that people in Africa, the America, and parts of the world have traditionally used urine for various medical indications for a very long time. Urine is known to have a potent diuretic effect, which is at the base of the 19th century application of cow's urine. In this aposine Swiss for edema or ascites. Urine is actually sterile when it's produced in the kidney, but once it's left the body, it becomes then contaminated. It's not toxic per se, but maybe in rare situations, urine is actually the cleanest liquid at hand. So that might be because you may need to use it on a dirty wound, or the only liquid to drink if you're buried like under a building or lost at sea. But most of the time there is better and tastier ways to improve one's health. Interestingly, polyphenols, or also known as resveratrol, they are also known as stilbenoids, and they consist of two aromatic rings, as you can see in the diagram, attached by a methylene bridge. They're naturally produced in many plants, more than 70 plants, and they can be found in green tea and also in red wine. They're actually found in the skin of red grapes. Polyphenols have been reported to have beneficial effects on cardiovascular disease and diabetes-related disorders, and also something called dyslipidemia and longevity. And we'll come to the reasons for this. So there is an enzyme called Ampk. This enzyme helps to control the energy stores in the body. It's found in the liver, in the kidneys, and also in the brain. Now, it's thought that with aging, the activity of this enzyme actually decreases with time, and actually certain things that we do in our kind of lifestyle, so things like smoking or heavy drinking or high fat diet, actually increase obviously the energy intake, and these can actually contribute to things like type 2 diabetes, which is often classified as a metabolic disorder, which could then develop into Alzheimer's disease. Now, there are things that you can do to increase the activity of AMPK. So things like increase exercise, reduce calories. There are certain things like in medicine, so kind of natural products, but also chemicals which are help to treat things like type 2 diabetes, so metformin. These are thought to increase the activity of AMPK and possibly increase the lifespan and longevity. In fact, there are many natural components that we find in Chinese medicine, and there is an impressive catalogue, more than 86 natural remedies that are used to treat just diabetes in Chinese medicine. The most common are called Berberine and also curcumin, which are known to activate this AMPK. Now, berberine is a naturally caring plant isoquinoline alkaloids, which such as Coptidis rhizome, which have a bright yellow colour that has been used in Chinese medicine to treat fungal infections, but also can be used for treating type 2 diabetes. Now, berberine has been suggested to have beneficial for the CNS disorders such as cerebral ischemia, schizophrenia, mental disorder, depression, and Alzheimer's disease. Also, another well-known herb, which is normally found as in curry powder, is curcumin. This also has many beneficial effects for both Alzheimer's disease and type 2 diabetes. And this is due to its ability to stimulate the activity of AMPK. Moreover, curcumin can actually inhibit both amyloid beta oligomers formation, so this is like a hallmark of Alzheimer's disease, but also something called tau phosphorylation, which is also could lead to Alzheimer's disease in transgenic mice. Lipic acid is an essential cofactor of mitochondrial respiratory enzymes. It's actually found commonly in foods, particularly in liver, kidney, spinach, yeast extract, and broccoli. Now, it can be absorbed and it's taken up by most tissues, including the brain, where it's actually reduced to an active form of dihydrolipic acid. Now, lipic acid is actually a naturally caring antioxidant, and its activity is due to its ability to scavenge for free radicals in the cell. The mechanism is facilitated by first chelating redox active transition metals, increasing the levels of glutathione and attenuating inflammatory responses. The other main change in European healthcare was the establishment of hospitals, but these were often preserved for the wealthy and rich. Now, surgical procedures improved, and survival from even simple procedures actually increased. So by the 15th century, Florence had 35 hospitals. During the Renaissance, public baths actually remained quite popular, and it wasn't until after this period that Europeans viewed water as a carrier of disease, and the Catholic Church started wondering about the morality of public bathing. The church eventually banned public bathing in an attempt to stem the spread of syphilis, which continued to spread. Humphrey Davey was an English chemist best known for his contributions to discoveries of chlorine and iodine. He made actually several reports on the effects of inhaling nitrous oxide, also known as laughing gas. It was actually often given to people at parties. He also invented something called the Davy lamp, which we can see here, which allowed miners to work safely in close contact with flammable gases. William Thomas Green Morton. So he was the father of the modern anesthesio American dental surgeon, who in 1846 gave the first successful public demonstration of ether anesthesia during surgery. He is credited with gaining the medical world's acceptance of surgical anesthesia. He also developed something called the Pharma inhaler that he tried to patent as a unique invention. Morton's genius resided not only in his observations of the power of ether, but also in the development of a crude but scientific method of regulating its inhalation, thus creating the field of anesthesiology. The father of immunology was Edward Jenner. He was an English doctor. He was the pioneer of the first vaccination, which was smallpox. In 1796, he carried out his now famous experiment on an 8-year-old James Phipps. Jenner inserted pus taken from the cowpox pustule and inserted it into an incision on the boy's arm. Jenner subsequently proved that having been inoculated with cowpox, Phipps was immune to smallpox. He submitted his paper to the Royal Society in 1797, describing his experiment, and was told that his ideas were too revolutionary and that he needed more proof. Undaunted, Jenner experimented on several other children, including his own 11-month-old son. In the following year, in 1798, the results actually were finally published, and Jenner actually called his new method vaccination, and that's where the name vaccination comes from. And it's after the Latin word for cow, which is vacca. But Jenner had no explanation why his method worked, so he didn't actually really understand that. No one could see the virus with the microscope at the time, so we didn't have powerful enough microscopes. If you can imagine, viruses are a size of about 100 to 200 nanometers. Jenner's method of vaccination against smallpox grew in popularity and eventually spread around the globe. About 150 years after Jenner's death in 1823, smallpox would be making its last gasps, and the World Health Organization eventually declared smallpox to be eradicated from the planet in 1980 after a massive surveillance and vaccination program. Gerard Johann Paul Domag, he was a German pathologist and bacteriologist. He was accredited with the discovery of something called sulfamido cryosidoin, also known as K1-730, and was the first commercially available antibiotic marketed under the brand name of protonzol. He received a Nobel Prize in 1939. So how did he treat his patients and diagnose them? Well, first he introduced sulfur drugs, all of which are related to the compound of sulfonamide. And he provided the first successful therapies for many bacterial diseases, especially staphylococcus or streptococcus infections, along with pneumococcal and tubercular infections. His own daughter actually became very ill with the streptococcal infection, and he actually, in desperation, gave her a dose of the protozol, a derivative of this, which the Vietnamese chemist Guillemot had synthesized in 1908. She made a complete recovery after taking the drug. So plants can be used for medicine, and there is a direct application of ethnomedical use, and there's a source of chemical diversity for screening. Herbal plants under This is called the DSHEA, which is the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act of 1994. It's a statute act of the US, and it defines and regulates dietary supplements. So the ethnomedical approach, the problem it may be hard to correlate folk medical concepts to Western medicine. Shannon Pharmaceuticals developed antifungals and antidiabetics based on this, and property rights were asserted by countries over ethnomedical knowledge and genetic heritage. Herbal products under the DSHEA, the Dietary Supplement Health Education Act, no pre-market evaluation for efficacy or toxicity, but requires correct labelling and GMP. And there's also established Office of Dietary Supplements within NIH. So ethnobotany essentially is a study of people and plants, and it combines the botanical classification of plants with ethnographical study of local uses of plants. It encompasses the selection and cultivation and processing of plants for medicine, food, agricultural and ecological management, and even the ethnopharmacology, ethnomedicine and medical anthropology study show how different cultures define and classify medicine, plant pharmacology and illness. Together, these specializations are important for new drug discovery. In fact, they form the basis for understanding the distribution of sets of compounds within nature along the classification and use of different cultures and societies for health. In fact, more than 1/3 of the US FDA approved therapeutic agents over the last 20 years have been derived from or inspired by natural products. And more than 50% of developed small molecule drugs from 1981 to 2014 originated from natural products. In fact, semi-synthetic natural products and drugs and natural product derived metrics. The traditional uses of plants and their combinations are part of an important natural pharmaceutical system. These systems include plant names, forms of processing, classification of properties for use in healing, and the knowledge is a source for new drug development and also plays an important role in development of new forms of food preservation as well as control of agricultural pests. For example, rosemary has been developed for storing things like cut meats, so things like ham, and they've been used instead of sulfites. So there is chemical diversity of plants, and this is actually attractive for screening in bioassays. So each extract can contain many novel compounds, and there is a number of kind of plant species. Plant defensive compounds may be tailored to interfere with mechanisms common to human diseases, and in fact antibiotic and antifungal compounds may be useful both in plant and to human medicine. Many drugs originally obtained from nature. For example, essential oils, so you can see in the top here, we've got lavender and then also chamomile. Essential oils have secondary metabolites which are produced by plants for protection, communication and attraction of pollinators. Essential oils have been shown to have antimicrobial property, and the broad spectrum and synergistic properties of essential oils are of interest for the development of new antibacterial and antimicrobial drugs. In fact, essential oils are concentrations of plant material produced mainly through steam distillation. And in fact, 1 kilogram of fresh lavender flowers will produce approximately 5 mils of essential oil. For cosmetic use, essential oil is required to be below 1% of the final product. And for products such as body oil to prevent skin reaction or toxicity. In fact, we've actually studied the effects or the synergistic effects of essential oils, so such as lavender and chamomile, in this year's CDIO Level 4 project. What we can see in this plate here, this is like a Rizazarin assay, and along the top we've got different percentages of lavender, so from 100% down to 25%, and these are in like triplicates. and then we've got lavender at 10%, 5%, and then 0. And then there's like a DMSO control. Now what you can see straight away is there is an effect of the lavender, even down as far as like 5%. The chamomile is not as effective. However, when you mix the lavender and the chamomile, you start to see synergistic effects. But in fact, the synergistic effects are coming through from the lavender. Here we present a case study. NCI collectors actually collected a tree called the Calophyllum langogerum from the Malaysian rainforest. And what they did was they were screening for HIV inhibitors. Extracts from many plants can be screened for the ability to protect the host cells against cell-killing action of HIV. And this is like a protection versus cellular toxicity. And using a bioassay guided fractionation with chromatographic separation of crude extract into fractions, they tested each fraction and then further separated most active fractions until there was a pure compound obtained. Often for the separation of the fractions, we use HPLC. The NCI chemists then isolated something called quinine A, which has anti-HIV principle of Calophyllum langogerum extract. The supply of the compound was actually problematic, so recollection attempt, the tree had to be logged. Other collections had only 0.1% of the compound of Calophyllum A. Taxonomy of Calophyllum is difficult, so new species and varieties are recognised, and related compounds can be considered as drug development leads. In fact, SmithKline scientists were able to isolate something called Inophyllum from the giant American snail as a HIV reverse transcriptase inhibitor and trace to Calophyllum in their diet. Calophyllum is superior to Inophyllums, and the total synthesis of Calophyllum A was achieved by SmithKline. Another thing that was discovered with Calophyllum A was that it possessed actually activity against mycobacteria and tuberculosis, and no other anti-HIV agent either in the development or approved or possessed this dual therapeutic capability. Since patients with HIV have actually weakened immune systems and are actually more susceptible to contracting TB compared to healthy individuals, and the dual therapeutic properties of this makes it actually a valuable therapeutic agent to these patient group and will help to distinguish it from other agents in its class.
Ayurveda medicine, is probably actually one of the oldest healthcare systems in the world. It dates from 1500 BC, from the ancient Indian scriptures, the Vedas. And there's actually six highly regarded Indian philosophical systems, a number of physical and behavioural sciences, and medial arts. And Veda translates as life, Aya, knowledge, Veda, and the rest upon the belief that diseases and health is a result of lack of harmony existing between the mental and emotional spiritual self. So, although laboratory experiments suggest that it's possible that substances in Ayurveda might be developed into effective treatments, there's no scientific evidence that they're effective are currently practiced. However, Ayurveda medicine is actually pseudoscientific. Other researchers consider it as a kind of proto-science or a trans-science system instead. In 2008 study, close to 21% of Ayurveda US and Indian manufactured pattern medicine sold through the internet were found to contain toxic levels of heavy metals, specifically lead, mercury, and arsenic. And the public health implications of such metallic contaminants in India are still unknown. So Ayurveda medicine actually consists of three energies. The first is Vata, and the second is Pitta and Kapha, which are the three doshas, which have three vital energies in the Ayurveda medicine. Each dosha combines two of the five basic elements, one of which is dominant. And the three doshas are responsible for all the physiological and psychological processes in our body and mind. In fact, the three doshas have separate energies, but different aspects of the same energy, and they fluctuate constantly and are in permanent balance with each other. So the imbalanced dosha are a cause of physical and psychological disorders, and the role of the Ayurveda practitioner is to rebalance those doshas. So he or she will reduce, calm, and strengthen or aggravate one or other of the doshas. So essentially, it's to kind of reduce stress, because it's thought that maybe stress could actually contribute to a certain disease. So Ayurveda medicine is based on these plant-based treatments, and they've been derived from roots, leaves, fruits, bark, and seeds such as cardamom and cinnamon. Also, animal products are used in the medicine, including things like milk and bones, and also fats are prescribed both for the consumption and for external use. And even the consumption of minerals, including sulfur, arsenic, which doesn't sound so great, lead, copper sulfate, and gold. And also the addition of minerals to the herbal medicine is also called Rasha Shasta. Purified opium is being used in 8 Ayurveda preparations, and that's thought to balance these energies, the Vata and the Kapha doshas, and also increases the Pitta dosha. It's been prescribed for things like diarrhea and dysentery, and also as a sedative and pain relieving properties. So Ayurveda also uses like oil and tar, which can actually be used to stop bleeding, and that traumatic bleeding can be stopped by 4 different methods, things like ligation of the blood vessel, cauterization by heat, the use of preparations to facilitate clotting, and the use of preparations to constrict the blood vessels. Oils have a number of ways, including regular consumption, anointing, smearing, head massage, application to the affected areas. And what you can see in the picture is they've got this table, which they use. The person lies down on the table, fully naked, and they pour oils over the body. You've also got here on the right like a steam bath, and they also use various kind of probably essential oils with those steam baths. and these are used in combination with conventional medicine.